Cars is kindly sponsored by Car Vertical, the only car history checking service you'll need, which references more than 20 databases globally to make sure you don't buy a car with a hidden past. For a special discount on the service, please use the link in the description down below. And now, today's feature presentation.
Hello everybody, another difficult day down in the YouTube mines for me, for I am behind the wheel of a TVR. Now a TVR is one of those things that whenever anybody offers me a drive in it, I'll almost always say yes. Saying yes to this was particularly easy because I haven't yet featured a T350 on the channel. And if you aren't intimately familiar with the TVR lineup, you'll be entirely forgiven for not quite understanding how this was different to any of the other cars TVR were making in what was, unfortunately, really the end of their sort of, well, major incarnation back in the early noughties. Most people know about the Tuscan. I would say most people know about the Sagaris. You probably also know about the Cerbera and maybe some of the older cars like the Griffith and the Chimera, but cars like this are, I think, where most people's knowledge goes a little bit hazy. So you had the Tuscan, which was, by the end of things, a convertible soft-top car with a 4-litre engine in it and a fiberglass body over a steel tubular chassis. You then also had the Sagaris, the crazy axe murderer looking thing, which was essentially a Tuscan underneath, but with a coupe body shell, crazy side exit exhausts, all that kind of stuff. However, below those were some other cars in the lineup, like, for example, the Temora. Now, the Temora I can kind of explain because that was the entry-level car. It was a 3.6-litre version of TVR's own Speed 6 in a sort of Targa top kind of thing, and it looks very different to the other cars in the range. I've driven a Temora, and I quite like it. It does feel genuinely different to the other cars in the lineup. However, then they did the T350, which came in two flavours. This, the 350C for coupe, and the T for Targa, which has two removable roof panels. Those apparently by some are known as the kettle, because they whistle so very much. This is a difficult car to explain. This one particularly so, because the idea of the T350C is, I guess, it's a sort of slightly lower down Tuscan or Sagaris, depending on whether you have the removable top or not. And it was a lesser car because it had a smaller engine in it, less performance, a lower price tag, and all that jazz. Through in here, really, it feels like every other TVR. It's a mixture of wonderful, crazy bits of metal, some slightly dubious fit and finish, plenty of leather, and the odd whiff of glue. But I quite like it. Getting in and out, not so easy, but once you're in, there is actually quite a bit of room, if for no other reason than TVR's former boss, Peter Wheeler, was quite a tall man. He was also quite a character, a rogue, some might say, but tall. Now, what makes this particular car so interesting is that it is a T350C Red Rose, which means it has a 4-litre engine in it from the Sagaris. So it has 400 horsepower rather than about 350. It has bigger rear brakes, improved suspension, and a few other bits to make it just that little bit better. So it's very hard to imagine why you would have bought one of these and not just a Sagaris. I suspect the real reason this car exists at all is because TVR just ran out of the 3.6-litre engines. I've even heard stories of a few people that have bought these thinking they had a 3.6, and then they have later found out that it actually had a 4-litre all along. Hey ho, that's TVR for you. Now, the one thing I have promised its owner, and more importantly his son, is that I'll tell you about their Instagram account, which is Car Ravioli, and you'll have the little link pop up now. This is a very, very stiff car, stiffer than I remember any other TVR being, although I haven't driven another TVR on this particular road, and that bit of road is a real testing section of tarmac, and this does not like it at all. So we've got some smoother roads coming up, and I've been given full permission to give this car the beans as soon as it gets to 60 degrees of temperature. And you have below you some pretty beautifully made pedals, although they aren't the easiest to modulate. Throttle and brake are absolutely amazing, some of my favourite in any car ever. You've got a really long throttle pedal, which famously was TVR's traction control, and the brake pedal is very race car-like, very, very firm. You need to give it a real shove to bring the car to a halt, but I love it. The tricksy one is the clutch, because it's actually very firm, a lot of resistance in it. It's not too heavy, but you do need a real shove to press it, and there's not actually much reason to press it that far because the clutch disengages fairly early on. So that means you sort of think it's further off than it is, and anyway, you do look like a bit of a fool. T5 Borg Warner box in these, so only the 5 ratios. Let's pop it into second and open the taps. She's not slow, that's for sure. Makes a pretty good noise too. This has ATC, ACT, anyway, it's got different back boxes on it, but it's not silly loud as some TVRs are. Lots of cracks and pops on the overrun though. I apologise, but I'm going to have to put the window down a bit. I want to get a bit of that noise myself. Lovely. Very flighty, this thing. I mean, probably less settled than, say, a Ferrari F12, anything like that. Really, really darty. Very short, very small car. I mean, it looks tiny when we're getting our photos of it in the car park. There's just nothing to it. Oh, it's so sensitive. I've driven a McLaren here this morning, and that thing is ridiculously sure-footed. It knows exactly what it's doing at all times. This is edgy. I've driven a lot of TVRs, and I'd say this maybe feels the sort of flightiest of all of them. Actually, the Tuscan and Sagaris gave me a fair bit of confidence. This one, not so much, but I'm getting into the groove with it. I never quite understood why it was that TVR felt the need to make not just one, but 2 of their own engines. I still haven't yet sampled anything with the AJP8, TVR's own in-house V8. So if someone out there has a car so equipped and they're happy for me to drive it, I would love to have a go. Oh, turning, really keen. Steering is beautiful. So much texture through it. Responds brilliantly. Lots of pull from low down. This does not weigh a lot, this car. Most TVRs of this era, they're between sort of 1,100–1,200 kilos. There's really nothing to them. I'll admit, I'm not driving this car fast. I feel on this road, it's not a happy bunny at all. The suspension is not settling, and that means the wheels are not in quite as much contact with the ground as I'd probably like for them to be. Oh yeah, you can feel that front end. It's a very typical TVR trait. The front end, really sharp, really darty, but the rear, not very well planted. It's just got that constant edge of wanting to kind of move on me, and I'm very nervous driving this car, especially because I know that Kelvin's son Killian really likes it, so I would hate to break it. Actually, that's not true. I've already broken it, actually. I broke the bonnet. I leant on it ever so slightly, and I broke a little clip that held it down. We fixed it because it actually was only put together but with some plastic washers and a nut that just came loose. Everything on here is very, very delicate, and it's full of TVR stuff. And I'm not just talking about the crazy vents and all that sort of thing. If you want to release the petrol flap at the back, there's a little sort of hand crank you sort of pull, which is made from metal and therefore is roasting hot, and you'll normally have your face, first time you use it, right over the fuel filler. And when you open the fuel door, you may get a face full of hot petrol. Oh, this car hates this road. It really does. It's sniffing out every single little lump and bump and piece of camber that it can find. And it's never ever settling. Dials, of course, typical TVR, totally bizarre and illegible. I thought the speedo was the tacho and vice versa. Oh, go on, let's try my torch test, my 3-point turn. This is going to be horrible. Because to get into reverse, I'm going to cheat. I'm not even going to reverse. I am going to let the car roll back down the hill. This is terrible driving. Don't drive like this, kids. And then hill start. Clutch biting point. There it is. There we go. And we're off. Yeah, that was horrible. Steering lock is really bad. No. The aircon actually works. But actually, the aircon's really cold. I'm very impressed. That's good. Right. Let's see if we can have a little bit more fun this time round. There are no drive aids in this car. All it is keeping me on the road is some faith in this suspension, which I don't have very much of, a dose of experience, and a fairly healthy dollop of common sense. That's it. Makes a cracky noise. Oh, it got really unsettled there on the downshift and rev match. Feel the rear try and break away. It's just as well that these are some of the most communicative cars you will ever drive, because if they weren't, I don't think anyone would drive one of these and survive at all. You got to be in the mood for this thing. A lot of other TVRs I actually quite happily do some fairly big miles in. Not this one. Maybe I've been mollycoddled by the McLaren. There's actually a great long distance car there. Very happy with the exhaust on this. Judged just right. I can hear it nicely, and I'm sure it'll make some good noises for the drive-bys, but standard exhausts on these actually were quite quiet. Everyone thinks all TVRs were super loud, but actually they only became super loud when owners changed the exhausts. The standard Sagaris is not noisy at all, and as ever, you do need to rev this thing out if you want all the speed, and you need to make sure your foot is all the way down. Thankful for a cyclist to give me a moment of respite from this thing. This is intense. This is like Caterham level intense. It's crazy. It's not just the pure speed, it's the concentration levels required and that constant feeling of it trying to want to bite you. And this is what people say about all TVRs, but I haven't experienced this in all TVRs. Odd that. I think with the roof down, you're quite happier going slower. And I think that's maybe this car's failing, that because it's a coupe, you want to just drive it faster, whereas in a convertible, I'd just be so happy with the noise, the wind in my hair, all that jazz. Like, I wouldn't worry about it. It's also one of those cars, you're not so sure it's actually going that quickly for something that doesn't weigh much with 400 horsepower until you look down and you realise you are. Fairly long gears don't help. I believe the old Tuscan S had like a ridiculous gearbox where you do 100 in second at a close ratio box. I don't think this has that. And fun fact for you, the reason TVR used sort of leather on everything was it's cheaper than plastic. Plastic moulding, plastic tooling is really expensive. When you make cars in the quantity that TVR were, you just can't afford that kind of stuff. So leather was the cheap alternative. And it just so happens that it feels great. It's wonderful, lovely. I'd like to be able to tell you about reliability, good or bad, with this particular car, but its owner hasn't had it for long enough for that to have become an issue, so sorry about that. Same with fuel. I don't really know how much it's drinking. It's probably a lot. Never quite a fan of these indicator stalks, because you can tell they're just normal indicator stalks with just something kind of put on top of them, so you don't think they're just, probably plain old Ford stalks underneath. But, what the hell, it's TVR. Still can't get over the fact that aircon actually works. Now, it might only be blowing out of this vent. Now, I can't tell you, but this vent is cold. All right, one last crack at the T350. This is not me deliberately soaring at the wheel. This is what the car's doing on its own. I'm basically just sort of keeping it in check. My suspension test here. Oh yeah, so she got through okay. I wasn't full pelt though. My test of that is full pelt through, and if the car bottoms out, but I did not have the cojones for full pelt. So it's lively, it's loud, it's entertaining, sounds fabulous. And that's not the same as being loud. Gearbox is really good, steering is wonderful if flighty, but the suspension's it's too fidgety for me, and honestly, I really want a TVR where the roof comes down. That to me is the experience. You have to be in the mood for this thing. You couldn't drive this if you weren't. You just couldn't. It is, however, nothing short of a riot. It is a real event, and I suspect most of the people looking at a car like this probably want this kind of driving experience. If you're worried this is going to be a sort of watered down TVR light, you don't need to worry. It's nothing of the sort. This is still the full thing. This is still the full Trevor. As ever, thanks everybody for watching. A big thanks to Kelvin and Killian for bringing their car out for me to enjoy. Don't forget to follow their Instagram page. please like, comment down below, and I'll see you all for the next one. Bye bye.